Hello, I'm Joshua Williamson, and I'm here to talk about my new comic book Dark Ride, and this is Forbidden Planet TV.
Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. An old friend of ours has returned once more, the one and only Joshua Williamson. How are you, brother?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm really well. Yeah, I'm really well. But I'm so pleased that you're on to talk about this book because it looks
Yeah,
absolutely awesome. So it's your personal project, Dark
yeah,
Ride.
yeah.
So yeah, what can you tell me about it?
Well, I have been obsessed with amusement parks like my whole life. I
Yeah,
grew up in Southern California, so it's kind of the thing you do. You go to them a lot, and I've always been really fascinated about how like amusement parks, particularly Disneyland, are these like perfectly controlled environments, right? Like everything about it is controlled, and I've always been interested in like what is the dark side of that? Is there an evil version of that? And so for years, I've always wanted to do a story. I love doing horror comics. I did Ghosted, I did Nailbiter, but I'd always wanted to do something involving amusement parks. And I finally landed on this idea about 3 or 4 years ago, and we've just been developing it this whole time. And now it's coming out in that Dark Ride. The easy pitch, I guess, is like, what if Walt Disney sold his soul to the devil to make Disneyland? That's part of it.
I
Um,
mean, that's such a great concept, mate. It really is.
I mean, it's such
I
a
kind of think he
go ahead.
might have done that, to be honest. Because
Oh,
it,
I mean,
it,
I find that the legend and the myth of Walt Disney to be so fascinating. Of
yeah,
like,
me too.
there's the legend that he like came up with the idea for Disneyland while he was at the park with his daughters, watching them on a merry-go-round, being like, "Oh, I wish there was a park like this." But that's a myth. Like he had been developing Disneyland almost his entire life in some form or another. His family had been tied into like World's Fairs, different kinds of like themed parks over the years. So it's like it was very much embedded in the DNA of Walt Disney before he created it. But the idea that they created this myth around that idea, that he just had this like aha moment one day, when in reality he'd been developing it for a very long time. Especially in Southern California, where there have been different like fairground parks that were kind of permanent, and even Osprey Farm had been there earlier. Um, I always found that very fascinating. But again, I also really love horror, and I wanted to do something that leaned into a more horror thing. And then also, what the book ends up kind of being about in some ways is like, what is even scary now, right? So it's like, if your job, which is what this park is about, if your job is to scare people, if that's the thing that you're supposed to do for a living, is you're supposed to design or develop things that scare people, how do you even do that? And I wanted to explore those ideas and challenges of like, if that's your thing, if your job is to scare somebody, how do you do that now when either the real world is terrifying, or
Yeah,
or they've seen it all, you
yeah,
know like you've seen all this kind of horror, every movie, so the book ends up becoming about that in a lot of ways. It was really fun. Like Andre Bressan was the artist I did Birthright with, and I mean, basically it's the entire same creative team from Birthright. So it's Andre, it's Adriano, it's Pat, like everyone who worked on Birthright for all 50 issues. We just moved them over to this book, and it's been really exciting. And uh, I don't know, it's very much a me book. It's
yeah.
a very personal book, and I'm really excited about it. As I was saying before we started, I actually, right before we got on the call, I saw them dropping the boxes off with the copies, and I was able to run outside and grab it. So I actually got to have it for the first time, like
Yeah,
getting to see it like just now.
yeah.
And it looks beautiful. It looks great. Like this is a really nice comic book package. Like I'm really proud of this.
And you've got those
Yeah.
beautiful cardstock covers on issue one, haven't you, mate? On the
Yeah, these are
series.
cover plus. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
so they're the cover
really
plus. They're
nice.
really nice.
Yeah,
It's oversized. Like this issue is the story part of this is 40 pages in this first issue, and it just looks great paper stock. I'm always obsessed with like the production of comic books, and so when I see something like
me too.
this where it has like a heft to it, like you
Yeah.
feel in your hands. I think the moment I held it, I was like, this doesn't feel like a regular
Yeah,
comic. Like this feels
yeah,
something
right
really
on.
nice and well
Yeah,
produced. But yeah, I always really I had always wanted to do a horror story kind of like this, and it took a while because even developing an entire amusement park took a long time.
yeah,
We actually have this thing in the back where it's like It's the because we have a index of all the different rides that are
Oh,
inside the
wow.
park.
Yeah.
We're
Okay.
gonna expand on that as we
Yeah.
go, and I think in the collection we'll have a lot more information like this. But yeah, the whole issue mostly revolves around this kid. His name is Owen, and he's starting his very first day at the amusement park. And the amusement park is called Devil Land. So he's
Yeah.
starting his very first day at Devil Land, and he loves it. He's obsessed with it. He loves all things horror. But while he's there, he starts to pick up like there's something wrong here. Like there's something definitely bad in this, you know. Um, I think a lot of us like we look at horror now, and you do kind of look at horror as like fun thing that I think if you're in the experience, you're so used to the idea that horror can be an escape, you know.
Yeah.
But in this case, you start to see that it's like, oh, this horror might be real, you know. And I think it allows me to play around with a lot of like tropes that I always like to play with, but also explore some stuff for me that's personal too.
Yeah, I was fascinated when you told me about the concept a while ago, because it genuinely felt to me, and I rarely get to say this because one thing we have in common is we've both read an absolute shitload of comic books, and I've been
Yeah,
reading them my entire life, and I'm a bit
yeah,
older
yeah.
than you, I mean, I'm just being so as I hear when you hear comic pictures from your favorite creators, they always sound amazing, but 9 times out of 10, they're a remix on something that you've seen or heard before,
Oh,
right?
sure, yeah.
I remember when you told me about what the concept of this was going to be, I was like, man, I actually don't think I've ever seen anybody do that before. You know what I mean? I think you've tapped into something that I'm not aware of. I mean, it's such a great idea.
Thank you. Yeah, again, it comes to when I was young, when I was in high school, I had this thing of like I either wanted to become. Do you know what an Imagineer is?
Absolutely, yeah, for
Okay,
sure.
yeah. So when I was in high school, I basically had paths. It was like, do I do comics or do Imagineering? And I chose comics, obviously, but it's always been
Yeah,
a part of my brain of like, oh, I still think about that a lot, like the Imagineering, and I've read a lot of books, and I got to work on the Haunted Mansion comic book
yeah.
about 10 years ago, almost now, or 6, 7 years ago. And getting to talk to the Imagineers was always really great. And so that's what this all is, but I appreciate you saying that. I mean, I think tonally the closest I could come to with this book is maybe Lock and Key in some
Yeah,
ways,
yeah,
I love Lock and Key. Like Lock and Key was also an influence on Birthright to a certain extent too.
yeah,
But that's all what, fed into this book, it's like I wanted to do something in a weird set piece, and I think an amusement park is a weird set piece, and getting to explore all these different ideas of, again, like what is even scary now, has been fun. But it's like that's the challenge of the book, is then I have to like answer those questions as I'm working on it. But yeah, this book, I mean, Andrei's art is so cool in here. Like he really went for it in a lot of places. And it's funny because Andrei's never been to an amusement park before, so I had to like send him like mountains of videos and pictures and reference so he would get it, and then he just nails it. Like there's times in here where it's like when the characters are kind of around, I think the energy that you get being in an amusement park, you can see that on the page. And I think that like the fact that Andrei was able to channel that even though he'd never been to one is really impressive. uh yeah, I love this thing.
I mean, I think one of the things that you've really, from the pages I've seen, one of the things you've captured really well is the fact that, um, for me, amusement parks in that say 4 hour span, 5 hour span when they're not operating,
Oh yeah,
they've
yeah,
always felt to me to be very creepy. It's one of the things that season one of
yeah.
Westworld captures really well.
Yes,
In the
Westworld.
middle of the
Yeah,
night in Westworld, when everything's being reconstructed and the hosts are being rebuilt, it's creepy, right? You
it's
know what I
creepy.
mean?
Yeah, when I was my wife and I years ago we went to Disneyland on Halloween. And when you go on Halloween, like actual Halloween night, it's limited. You have to buy a separate ticket. They close off parts of the park to make it more Halloween friendly, and you can go trick or
Yeah,
treating and all this stuff, and it's really awesome. But because there's not a lot of people there, because again, they really limit the amount of people that can be in the park in that time period, it's very fun. But one of the things I thought was really interesting was that, it was really late at night, and they did the fireworks show, and we kind of walked away from the fireworks show as it was ending. We went over to Fantasyland, And Fantasyland is fascinating because, and this is actually part of what this book is, part of the motivation about this. There was a debate at times of should the rides at Disneyland be scary? So that's why like the original Snow White ride was like Snow White's Scary Adventure, because it was scary. And then recently,
Yeah.
like they've slowly changed to being not scary, and now it's not really scary. They've changed the title and everything. Uh, when Walt Disney died, there was a debate between the two people who were working on the Haunted Mansion. Like the Haunted Mansion kind of sat there for almost 9 years before they finished it, and the reason it took so long was because the two people who were working on it, they couldn't come to a conclusion of should it be scary or should it be funny. And because Walt Disney had passed, there was no tiebreaker, right? They
Yeah.
couldn't decide. And what they ended up coming to a conclusion was it's going to be half scary, half funny. So if you're ever in the Haunted Mansion, the first half of it is all spooky and scary,
Yeah.
and then after the bride in the attic, like quote unquote, kills you, you land in the backyard, and all of a sudden it's funny and they're laughing and they're singing, and then it became funny and wacky, right? So they
Yeah.
basically like split it. And then what was great was they created a soundtrack that goes over the whole thing that kind of ties it all together, and it becomes this like beautiful thing. um Now, so we're back in Halloween, and we're in Fantasyland again. Fantasyland has this like undercurrent of scary because there was a part of it that was designed to be scary, but over the years that's been kind of toned down, right? So we're in Fantasyland, and because of the fireworks, they had done this thing where during the fireworks they shut Fantasyland down during the fireworks. But because we happened to get over there as the fireworks were ending, they opened it, but there was no one there, no one.
Wow.
And it's just me and my wife on Halloween walking through Fantasyland with the only people there are a couple of employees. And we went on a Snow White ride, which again back then was built to be scarier. But there was something really interesting about going on that ride where you get really used to, when you're in Disneyland, you get really used to the ambient sound of people,
Yeah.
right? Like
Of
there's
course.
music,
Yeah.
there's people, right? But because it was Halloween, they didn't have that. Not only was it the ambient sound is different, right? They changed that to be spookier, but also there were no people there. So that ambient sound of just people was missing. And so to hear Disneyland that way was really fascinating. And we went on Snow White, and it completely transformed the way that ride felt. Like it, for the first time, you were like, oh yeah, this is actually built to be scary. Like you
Yeah.
really started seeing it and feeling it, and we noticed things we'd never noticed before. And a lot of that, again, like that stuff, like being there that night and seeing those things, all that came into in this. As you can tell, I'm not lying when I say I'm obsessed with amusement parks. I know a
And
lot
I,
about
but
so
but
but
I think
yeah.
that's why this is a fascinating opportunity for you, because to tune all those thoughts that you've had
Yeah,
onto the page and to be able to use it as an opportunity to create this narrative, because I think anything that works hard to present one face to the public but
hmm
has a whole kind of structure lurking behind it, that
oh
in
yeah,
itself is quite creepy. It's like cruise ships. If you ever
oh
see
yeah,
footage of when like divers are fixing the ships and you go underneath, and they are far more massive under the water than you'd think. There's something quite ominous about them, right? Yeah. Anything that
yeah.
has all of that, and I think that's one of the interesting things that you've captured with this book. Is you've only got to turn the dial 5 degrees, and it's all actually quite creepy. But people, it's not in people's interest normally to talk about that or think about it. And I think that's why it's so interesting that you're doing what you're doing with this book.
Yeah, I mean, I love thanks. It's funny. Like, I had somebody who thought the book was going to be this like mocking of amusement park. Like, no, this is like a love letter in some ways,
Yeah,
like because I really do love them. But I do think it's interesting how there is this sort of undercurrent dark side that we don't necessarily see, and they control that. They don't
yeah,
want you to
right
see
on.
that.
Yeah,
Like they're really the fact that like if something bad happened in an amusement park, particularly a Disney park, security's there like that, and you would
yeah,
be
yeah,
like, where did they come from?
yeah,
Like there's such a interesting dynamic to it. But I'm always fascinated by, and this is again Imagineering, like not just controlled experiences, but just the development of that idea. And that's where Westworld is also an influence on this too. Obviously,
yeah,
it's like, I think the idea of like people sitting down to create an experience for somebody that every little bit of it is immersive. I find that fascinating. Like if you ever go into, if you're like at Disneyland and you start looking around, you start realizing how much design and thought went into every little thing around you.
Yeah.
Like somebody thought about every little thing, and then you go on one of the rides. If you're in like say Indiana Jones, and just the line to get on the ride is so immersive, and then you start looking at stuff, and you're just like, somebody spent time, like they had a meeting about that. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't just like
Yeah.
somebody like slap something on a wall. It's like, no, somebody designed that, they built that, they had a meeting about it, they put work into it, they thought about it, they probably got notes on it. Like somebody developed this wall. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
such a fascinating thing, and it's like, yeah, like it's just so powerful. Like really see, people are building this stuff, and then you get to experience it. And then also, and this is a Disneyland thing that it's like the moment you walk into Disneyland, they're trying to tell you a story. It isn't just you're going on this ride. They're trying to tell you a story. So like Pirates of the Caribbean, yeah, it's a fun ride, but they're trying to tell you a story. And I'm always obsessed with people trying to find different and new ways to tell a story. So again, with this, it's like this is an amusement park, but they're not just trying to tell you a story. They're trying to tell you a scary story.
Yeah.
And all that, like I'm always very fascinated by that, like the amount of work that goes into these kind of immersive storytelling experiences. And so yeah, all of that is what put into this book, and I'm really proud of it. Yeah, just I mean, it sounds silly to get to the nitty gritty like this, but just the quality of the paper is really nice. But it feels like something. It feels like something special, and this is a book that I'd wanted to do for a long time, and I wasn't sure who would ever get off the ground just because of timing, and my own schedule, as you know, or you're aware how busy I'm all
I
the
know.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
mate,
I was.
I
Yep.
think it's great that you are at the point in your career, because of all that busyness and the success you've had, you've been able to
Sure.
open this door and do this. And I can tell, chatting to you, and when we talked about it before, I just can tell how much you love it and how much you put your heart and soul into it. And that is where great comic books come from, always.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to be obsessed with it. I always
Yeah.
feel like you have to be obsessed with the project, and otherwise it's gonna fall apart. Like obviously you have to love it, but I think it goes a little step beyond that. You got to be a little obsessed with it
Yeah.
and that's what this is for me. This is something I've been obsessed with.
That's wonderful, mate. Before we go,
Yeah.
what's your favorite ride at Disneyland?
Oh, Haunted Mansion.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
beyond a
Haunted
shadow of
Mansion.
a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, no question. I that ride is important to me, and it is my favorite ride of all time. There's other rides that kind of compete, or there are rides where I'm like, that is an amazing experience, and there are rides that I love. And there are rides that have surprised me that I've just been like, this is a amazing ride, like bravo. But
Yeah.
that one, it's one that I always come back around to, and it's one that like my kids like, and so it's really that's easily my favorite. I've it's always whenever I go to a new park that I haven't been to before. So whether it's like Disneyland Paris, like when I went to Disneyland Paris, it was the first ride
Yeah.
we went to, but yeah, that's easily my favorite. I mean, that's why I got to write the Haunted Mansion comic book, because I had been like campaigning to write anything Haunted Mansion related for years. But that's why I got to write the Haunted Mansion comic for Marvel. And you can't really tell in my office, but like on the higher up areas, I have so much Haunted Mansion stuff in here, and in storage. I have all kinds of props and stuff from Haunted Mansion. It's definitely my favorite by far.
That mate, that is a great answer. And we've been talking about your awesome new book, which everybody having watched this conversation, you're really scratching the surface of Joshua's passion for this. And pick up the book, because it will reward your interest. His passion is all on the page, and you can order it from the links attached to our conversation. And brother, I'm very excited to see where you go with it all, and very pleased that you've got the chance to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I hope everybody buys it and enjoys it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, mate. You take care of yourself, and I know you're coming back for a future episode in the near future when you've got some other stuff that we can't talk about now that we will talk about in the future.
Yes, very soon.
So you take care, mate, and I'll see you very soon. Cheers,
You
Josh.
too.
Take care, mate. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.